Hi, I'm Tony Bowen and welcome to my Corn Country Rails. This is my last monthly build series on this locomotive. I started in January of 2020 and here we are in June of 2020 and I'm just ready to wrap it up. So some things I worked on this past month is obviously all the locomotive was painted in our last month series, but I did not have the number boards yet. I was waiting on the decals for that. Sure enough, 2 days after I posted the update video, the decals arrived, but that's fine. Also, I was waiting on some train line air hoses. I was kind of running on a shortage of them. I was getting them from BLMA and can't find them anywhere. And so I was able to find a new source called Miniatures by Eric in Canada. They're all brass cast and they're great prices and the product is really good. So I ordered several of them. Also went ahead and finished up the MU hoses on the back, put on the front coupler, and then obviously the window glazing throughout the whole unit and the lenses, and now it is done. Oh, and one last thing that I did is I gave it that light weathering. I didn't want it to be real heavy, but I wanted a little bit of road use on it. So the top of it has some heavy kind of, exhaust weathering on it. And then on the sides, just some light kind of dusting that would come up from those dry summers. So a little bit of that dirt and dust and grime it would get off the rails. And then also touching up the fuel tanks too to match that. So I hope you'll stick with me and kind of watch how I finished up this unit and wrapped it up. And if you are so inclined to go back and watch the whole series, they're all on my YouTube channel. Otherwise, thanks for taking part. This was my first unit build that I've done, and hearing the response from people and viewers like yourselves, it makes me inclined to do another, whether it be a locomotive or some other series that I do a monthly build on. So anyway, thanks for tuning in today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. So as I said, my decals arrived about 2 days after I posted my May update. I used the microscale EMD, E Unit, and F Unit decals. I like that they have the black or white inserts for the number boards, and then obviously give you a whole variety of different size numbers for the number boards. So I was very fortunate to stumble across a post I had seen on an N-Scale Facebook page regarding detail parts from a company called Miniatures by Eric. And so I was able to get my train line hoses along with a few other detail parts there. I had the BLMA MU hoses that would go on the back of the locomotive already that I had purchased. The train line hoses on the Miniatures by Eric were very clean castings. I painted them right on the sprues and then basically pulled off the ones I needed. I also had the E and F Unit Ultimate Detail set. I still needed to put on the backup mirrors on the locomotive. Past experience has told me that I've always added these on last because they seem to stick out just a little bit and I've bent too many. So as I was putting on those last minute details like the MU hoses, the train line hoses, I also put on the backup mirrors. The the MU hoses on the back were pretty easy to put on, and it was a matter of just drilling a hole, putting them in place. The train line hose in the front, simply drilling a hole in the pilot, putting a little glue at the end of the sprue, and putting the train line hose to hang down. I gave it plenty of clearance so that the coupler could also swing. So I know it's a little off and out of proportion, but that seems to be a good placement for it where it doesn't tangle up with other equipment. Now, having completed all of the detail parts that would go on the locomotive, this was a good time to take it outside, get some photos of it, but also take it out and seal it with some dull coat. Because my next step was to add the weathering. I always like to add the weathering, then my next step after that is putting in the window glazing. I hate having those frosted looking windows of people that'll put them in the model, spray it with dull coat, and then all the window glazing is frosted over. So I always tend to save the window glazing part for last. After I brought the locomotive in, I let it set for about 24 hours to let the dull coat cure. I just found that if you try to go too quick with weathering powders with dull coat that's still wet, you get some streakiness that does not look good, so it's best to let it cure. I prefer using the Bragdon powders. I really like some pan pastels, but I use the Bragdon powders on this. I always make sure that I kind of put latex gloves on my hands because any oils or grease, you can certainly leave fingerprints in the weathering. And so I started on the roof with a micro brush, just adding some soot to the exhaust stacks, and then I would take another brush and kind of fan that out, going obviously both forward and backwards lightly. Remember, I don't want to knock off any of the lift rings and that are up on the roof. For the sides, I started with the sand hatches and kind of just made some streaks coming down. And then I just lightly brushed up from the trucks going up the side of the car body and just would blend that in. And then when I was happy with it, it would be time to take it outside and seal it again. Once it was outside, I sealed it again with some dull coat. Now, I caution you, go really light on this. Otherwise, a lot of your weathering will be lost. And so just a light mist, and that's all I did. And it's amazing how the natural sunlight really captures the weathering, yet when I can bring it inside and have it under the layout room lights, a lot of that weathering doesn't show up quite as well. So if you feel the need and have to hit some spots to make them a little darker, you certainly can do that. Once the locomotive was brought back in and the dull coat was cured, I separated the chassis from the car body. It was time to move on to the window glazing of the locomotive. Most of the time I do not use the Kato window glazing. I use the front windows, but the side windows I get rid of. I don't like the thickness of the plastic. And so I'll pop in the front windows using the Kato glazing, but then I will use the regular acetate clear film that comes with like DPM models and cut those to fill in for the other windows. So I had 2 portal windows on each side of the car body I needed to replace. Other 2 were filled in, I blanked over. And then I cut a small strip and have it match the profile of the cab windows. It gives you a nice thin window and they're much clearer to see. Time for coupler installation. A problem with a lot of Kato locomotives is the front pilot pocket isn't big enough to accept a microtrains coupler box. So instead, I get rid of the little clip that comes with the Kato coupler, and I get rid of part of the microtrains cover. And instead, I will slip what's left of the coupler, both halves and the spring, and the bottom box, and then just run that screw right through that little circle that's at the top of the pilot. Once it was done, I put it on the track to test for height, make sure the gauge was correct, and once it was, then I went ahead and added weathering to the coupler. For the back of the locomotive, I went ahead and used a little bit of the Tester's clear cement that you can make window glazing out of, and just a small droplet to put in for that reverse or backup light. And then obviously you can see the MU hoses that are hanging down on both sides of the coupler. And on this coupler, I just left the Kato coupler for right now. It could be changed out in time with a microtrains if I want to. But right now it seems to be functioning well, so I just left it as is. So this concludes and wraps up the Kato E-8 monthly build series that I've been working on. A couple last minute shots of different views of the locomotive. Thank you for watching if you've been following the whole series, and giving me the encouragement to do another series sometime in the future. Thanks again for watching, and everybody stay healthy and take care.